Three friends boarded Disney's Galactic Starcruiser to seek their destiny and emerged as heroes of the Halcyon. Hello and welcome to Heroes of the Halcyon, the best, and to the best of our knowledge, only Galactic Starcruiser superfan podcast on the interwebs. I'm Galactic Starcruiser superfan Drew, and with me are...
Superfan Christine.
And Superfan Martin.
You know, every week when we do the show, I think to myself, there's no way we're going to top that. It can't get any better than that episode. And we keep finding interviews that are just super cool. Why don't you tell people what we have this week, Martin?
Well, this week was so much fun. We invited a group of 5 incredibly talented authors who specialize in Galactic Starcruiser fan fiction. And this takes the characters that we all know, that we all love, and expands their stories in really interesting and new ways.
It was so much fun to talk to these folks, and it was great to see how they've taken these characters and really made them their own.
But before that, we've actually got another announcement about some new videos that Disney's put together that coincidentally, we kind of referred to this exact type of video was needed in past episodes. And then we've also got another special announcement from the Heroes of the Halcyon team.
So I don't know if you guys remember, but just last week we were talking about the need that the Starcruiser folks have to put a video up outside, perhaps, so that people know a little bit more about the voyage when they go in, so they get a better onboarding experience. Do you remember this conversation we had just last week?
I do remember that conversation just last week.
And as it would have it, we had no idea this was coming, truly. I wish we had an inside track, because that would be amazing, of course. But Nick Tierce on Twitter actually posted a link to 3 videos now that are sent to booked guests. The 3 videos are all onboarding videos. One talks about using the Play Disney app and kind of gives you the intro into joining your Disney account to the Disney Play app, so it kind of links you in so you can see a little bit. The second one talks about the data pad and how it shows parts of your mission, parts of your schedule, and allows characters to interact with you. And then the third video actually gives you tips like get involved, ask questions, talk to people. The day on Batuu is actually very important to your voyage, and other tips. So it's very clear that they've been listening to the results of those surveys, like the one that Milton mentioned that he had sent to Len Testa and Jim Hill on their show. So it's cool to see they're actually paying attention.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm really glad that we were able to get this particular set of links from Nick Tierce. On his last appearance on our show, on the onboarding we were discussing this type of video even back then.
Yeah,
so
right, yeah.
Truly, Disney is listening to these surveys and what people are saying. So if you get a survey post-voyage, please take the time to respond to it in some detail, because it matters and this experience just gets better as a result. I personally think these 3 videos exactly fit the bill for what we were saying they needed. This exactly, to the letter, fills this void that they had.
Yeah, and it's good to see that Disney's, again, paying attention to their survey and finding ways to improve things for their guests.
I like to think that they're not only listening to the surveys, but that they're listening to Heroes of the Halcyon, and that they made these little tweaks just because of us.
Well, sure, it's good to put that in our hearts and hope and pray, but...
I mean, you can't tell me I'm wrong, so, you know.
Sure.
So this week, we are super excited to finally be able to announce that Heroes of the Halcyon has their own Patreon page.
Woohoo!
Yes. We're super excited. We've had so many of you ask how you can support us, and this is the easiest way for you to be able to do that.
Yeah, running a website, running a podcast, there are expenses, of course, from time to time.
There are.
Well, on our Patreon page, there are 4 different membership tiers, and it all starts with the Climate Simulator. And for $2 a month, it's really a thank you to the Heroes of the Halcyon. Helps us keep going every week with new episodes. And as a thank you to you, you get a really cool Heroes of the Halcyon holographic sticker. And we definitely appreciate the support. And then moving up to the next tier, Drew, what do they see?
The next level is the Atrium level. Supporters at the Atrium level are going to get their own digital Kenner-style action figure card back. You'll just have to send us a picture that you have. Maybe you've taken it aboard the Halcyon on your Galactic Starcruiser voyage. Maybe you've taken it in your backyard with a lightsaber. Maybe you've taken it on a trip to Batuu. This is a great way for you to have a memorabilia, and who doesn't want to see themselves as a Kenner-style action figure? What's the next level, Christine?
Well, our next tier is the Sublight Lounge. And who doesn't want to go to the Sublight Lounge?
Tabuite!
Tabuite. At this level, you're going to get the digital card back, but you're also going to get a real card back in person, in the mail, directly to you.
Yeah, it's 6x9, two-sided, shows your picture on the front and a lovely picture on the back of some other people that we might know.
It's literally the same size, and as a Kenner-style card back that you get on an action figure. Looks just the same thing. What a fun memorabilia trip.
You printed out a bunch of these for some of the Imagineers I know when you went to Star Wars Celebration, and when I saw them, I was like, okay, I need to have one of these.
Everyone needs to have one of these.
That's right. And of course, don't forget, that's super cool. Here's the Halcyon holographic sticker.
And for our final tier, you become a hero of the Halcyon. And at this tier, not only do you get the cool holographic sticker, you get the digital card back, you actually get the in real life printed physical Kenner style action figure card back with your picture, your name, or your character's name. You also get an awesome Heroes of the Halcyon t-shirt.
This is like the ones that we wore on our second day of our voyage, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
They're not those t-shirts, though, right? We're going to make new ones for these people?
We'll get
I'm not giving anyone my t-shirt.
Yeah.
Nice. That's good.
Well, we definitely appreciate the support. It means a lot to us. We love putting out these episodes every week. And so definitely take a look at our Patreon page. And if you can throw us a couple bucks a month, we'd certainly appreciate it.
Of course. And if you want to see the Patreon page, it's at patreon.com/heroes of the Halcyon.
So I've always been a huge fan of fan fiction. And when I found out that Galactic Starcruiser had fan fiction too, I knew this was something that we had to talk about.
I was a little scared, Christine, because fan fiction sometimes has, some connotations that aren't maybe family friendly. So I was a little scared what I'd see, but it turned out, what a treasure trove of awesomeness.
Yeah.
These are ideas that are so fun to kind of just like, what if? I love this.
And how often have we talked about, if we could just have one more day on Starcruiser? Well, this is your one more day. This is what happens after your voyage ends, and you find out, where did these characters all go?
Yeah, it truly was one of the most 4D meta moments of my entire life when Christine just called to me from her office saying, Martin, you've got to read this. And she brings me into her office and reads me this short story of Galactic Starcruiser fan fiction from one of the authors that we're about to talk to. And it actually had a mention of my character, Jorg Sakul, in this story.
That's awesome.
And to just see that how one, my fiction is feeding their fiction is such an absolute delight. It was a joyous moment for me to see that, and we can't wait to talk to all of our authors today.
So let's do it now.
Well, thank you to all of you for joining us today. We have been talking about this fan fiction episode for weeks. So we are super excited to have you on and to talk about fan fiction for Galactic Starcruiser. Wanted to start with a little bit about yourselves and how you got into writing specifically, if we can. Let's start with Kim.
All right, so I'm Kim. So I kind of got into fan fiction kind of because I was always interested in storytelling. So I wouldn't say that fan fiction itself was my start. I've always written stories and drew comics as a kid and was on school newspaper in high school and all that. Just have continued to pursue creative writing since then. So fan fiction, though, was always something that was just like pure joy, like this thing that I did on the side where I was able to, write whatever I wanted to write and find readers who also liked the same stories. And so no matter, I guess, what time of life I was in, it was always such a wonderful thing to do. But recently, of course, thanks to the pandemic, I got back into it after not writing it for a very long time. And it has helped me immensely with my burnouts with my original work. So it's just like finding the joy again in writing. And so that's been a big thing with me with my recent fan fiction.
Yeah, it's amazing that there are those little bits of positivity that came out of the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
And everybody either finding or going back to their passion seems to be that one positive thing that everybody seems to hold on to. What about you, Rena?
I'm a creative writing major, so writing definitely is a really big thing for me. But honestly, I started with fan fiction, I think, just because growing up, that was really where I learned I wanted to write, if that makes sense. Like, it was a sort of thing where it was playing around with the characters and the stories and the universes that I was obsessed with. You know, it was a really great way for me to practice those sorts of skills in terms of how to develop characters, how to create a plot that makes sense, how to use like settings to your advantage and stuff like that.
And Sarah, what about you?
Here's a good if you've ever seen Turning Red, that's a good example of my start. Yeah, you know, similar years, similar. It's just, you know, not fake boy bands, but yeah, just kind of, you know, fun stuff as a kid with my friend, and it's nothing that ever saw the light of day. It was early days of internet, so it was all just for fun, just whatever. Some of it eventually morphed into online role playing instead, so that's kind of where I got my little short bursts of creative writing out instead of like full on fan fiction. And I kind of didn't do a lot since then. It's really like this fandom that's kind of brought me into like I want to do more. And that's kind of where I've jumped back into fan fiction for a while.
That is awesome. And Coward, how about you?
I guess I first started reading fan fiction in middle school when I didn't have a phone for myself, so I was just reading over the shoulder of one of my friends who was letting me do it. We were reading fics that were probably way too like angsty and dark for middle schoolers to be reading. But you know, I think that's where I just sort of got the appreciation for works outside of the general line of canon. Of like, I enjoyed these things a bit more than what happened in canon. Even if they were darker, it was just more drama for me. And even when they were lighter. But I never got my first thrust into actually writing it until I was in high school. And then it was dark stuff. It was dark stuff. Yeah. But I have thankfully grown up a bit. And that's when I sort of got more into the Starcruiser after Phantom. I've just been writing as sort of a pastime whenever I get the inspiration, which is that random and not really as much as I would like right now. It's just slow periods at work. That's when I'll pick up my phone and go on Word and type something in.
That's what's so amazing now is you can just, with your phone, just start typing away. And yeah, that's fantastic. And Annika, how about you?
So I don't remember a time that I wasn't telling stories. As soon as I could talk, I was telling stories, and I wrote them down as soon as I could write. In my, you know, real job, I do a lot of academic writing, and so fan fiction is my way of. I study trauma and trauma responses, and so fan fiction allows me to get away from that like heavy stuff. Even though, as they were saying, it's dark fic, I would say that I also write dark fic in addition to happy things because that's what I know best. But it allows me to play around with it with fictional characters in a way that's more healthy. So I really appreciate it as sort of a tool to keep me on an even keel. And Star Wars in particular, Star Wars fan fiction has really helped me get out of my shell, I would say, because there's so many characters and there's so many different ways to express trauma and darkness, but also how important the light is and how important to find that light is.
One thing that I love so much is that while we've been talking, you guys have been sharing various pieces of your part, and several of you all nod at the same time. So I can see this as a fairly common either origin story or way for folks to get into it. That's very cool. So I will admit I was not very familiar with fan fiction until we started talking about the story. Christine, you brought this to Martin and I at first were like, I don't know about that. But then I said, well, it seems she's very passionate about it. So Coward, I think you were talking in it before we went on air. Where do you guys all publish your fan fiction?
So we all publish it to archiveofourown.net, which is sometimes, .org, sorry. Okay. It's sometimes abbreviated as AO3.org. It is basically an archives system created by fans for fans, because there have been histories in fandom of corporations who own fan fiction archives going through and purging all fic that they deem problematic. And when I say problematic, I mean gay. Okay. Yeah, gay relationships with even like the slightest bit of sex they would remove because they wanted to appeal to advertisers. Okay. Whereas Archive of Our Own runs entirely off of donations, so they don't need to worry about that. They also have an excellent tagging system, so if you don't want to see something in a certain fic, you can remove that from your list of recommended fics, or the list of fics you're seeing. And let's see. Well, yeah, fanfiction.net is mostly just it's not a good place to post right now.
Okay.
Wattpad isn't a good place to post. Tumblr, I mean, we could post on Tumblr, but we wouldn't have the benefits of that tagging system or those good search features or that guarantee that it's never going to be deleted from under us for whatever reason.
So on AO3, you mentioned the tagging and the filtering. So this would be a way for folks who maybe are afraid of some stuff that might be not safe for work. They could filter that out so they're seeing just the stuff that maybe they want to see, stuff about Wraith or stuff about Croy, and they can see that kind of thing. Is that how it works?
Yeah. It's sort of, it works like that, where you could tag out anything you don't want to see. It uses keywords, and it uses a keyword like an umbrella system. That's the word. It uses an umbrella system. So one specific word, like if you filter out the word NSFW, any possible word that could be associated with NSFW is removed from the list.
That's cool.
But I think it's also important to say that in the Starcruiser community in general, I think we've been pretty good, like as the community who are here and present, of not going into that range with the Starcruiser. I don't know if it's generally because the Starcruiser is an attraction which some would say is for children,
right?
Or if it's because in using actors, if you don't use such a hodgepodge that they're practically unrecognizable to any actor, you're technically be sexualizing the actor. We don't want to go into that sort of thing.
Well, it was a whole world. As I started exploring research for this episode, I was fascinated how much there is. So I'm looking forward to exploring even more.
Well, it's funny, when Christine did come to us, Drew and I both kind of scratched our head, and then I looked down at this 30-page volume I have of Jorg Sakul's backstory, and I'm like, what is this if not fan fiction? Mm-hmm. And it was the most fun thing for me to write. I mean, I went through several different iterations of storylines and whatnot, and to realize that I wrote fan fiction. That was, and it was astoundingly good for me to have in my head. Where's this character been? What's he looking for? I loved building my character. I know you guys had just as much. Christine had a ball exploring all the intricacies of Ryloth and the Twi'lek culture. It was truly one of the favorite parts of the entire Starcruiser experience was creating Jorg Sakul.
Oh yeah, Zoran Vox is a real person to me.
Yeah,
so,
100%.
No question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're going to get to Star Wars questions very soon, but one question we kind of want to ask right now is: have you written fan fiction for any other fandoms, and if so, what? And let's start with Rena.
I definitely have written for a lot of fandoms. Not all of it has been published, though, I will say that.
Sure.
There is quite a lot of it that I've written on my own, either just to see if I could do it, or just wrote it on my own and decided, I don't like this. Like, nobody gets to see that. The only other thing that I've written, I think, Starcruiser definitely I've written a lot of stuff for, but the only other thing I've written this much stuff for would probably be the web series Who Killed Markiplier, which is incredibly niche. I don't expect anybody to know what that is.
I'm nodding as though I do, but it's really just positive feedback, just so you know.
I appreciate it. I appreciate that so much. Yeah, I think that's probably the one that I've written the most for, so I'll just say that.
Annika, what about you? What other fandoms have you written for?
So I write, in addition to Star Wars, I write a lot of Star Trek and a lot of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And those three fandoms are like gigantic fandoms that have very niche, tiny sub-fandoms, for example, Starcruiser within them. Mm-hmm. And so that's sort of my thing, is to find like the tiny bits in the giant fandoms. But I just write a lot, like anything. I'll watch like a movie like Twister, and I will go to see if there's Twister fanfiction because I want more of like literally any story.
Yeah.
I want more of it. And so I write a lot as well as read a lot.
Well, let's go to Coward. What other fandoms have you written for?
I was in the Phantom of the Opera fandom. I wrote like a majority of the fictions I've ever written for that fandom. and I sort of cleaned them up and removed some of them from my account before this podcast because of reasons.
Reasons. Right.
Yes. But I did write some works beforehand that I also just wasn't that proud of in other fandoms. You know, when you're a kid, you think real person fiction is a bit more good than
again nodding from everybody. I love it.
And sometimes I do think that I shouldn't have orphaned those works. I should have continued them, but anonymously, because I think there are good stories under the using real people as props.
That's
but
cool.
I've moved on to Starcruiser, and I don't know what's next after this.
Nothing is after. It's Starcruiser forever. Kim, what other fandoms have you written for?
So recently, right? Well, again, thanks to the pandemic, I've written a little bit in the Marvel fandom, and also I don't know how obscure this is, but Thunderbirds, which is a
that I know about. Yeah.
There you go. Yes. So there was recently a revival with like a CGI show, like more so like kind of a kid show. But I had gotten into the original one. And when I saw everybody going crazy for the CGI one, I was like, but wait, I want more content of the old one. And so it kind of inspired me to start writing. But everything I write has to do with romance, though. So it's no matter what fandom I'm in, that's usually what pulls me in. And for those two areas, those are the recent ones. So,
Cool.
Sarah, what about you? What other fandoms have you written for?
My early ones, as shout out to the 90s kids out there, Animorphs. You know, you grow up, you're reading a kid's book series, you want to be part of it. So that's where you get your chops doing your self-insert. I'm going to be an Animorph too. And that's kind of a lot of the stuff that I did. When I switched more to the role-playing stuff, we were very heavily influenced. This is the years that Lord of the Rings films were coming out, and we were getting the Star Wars films. And so a lot of that was influenced by that. It's kind of where I got some of my practice runs out.
So another question that we commonly ask most of our guests, of course, is what their relationship is to the War of the Stars. And, we're going to switch up a little bit. Kim, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background with Star Wars?
it's always kind of been in my life, but sort of in my younger years in the background. I mean, my mom was the big Star Wars fan. I remember, always having the mini marathons at home of the original trilogy, and it just always being this, center of my life. But personally, though, I was always more into fantasy as a kid. So I was, obsessed with the Labyrinth and Narnia and all that. And I was like, oh, sci-fi is cool, but I like magic. I think it wasn't until I got a lot older that I really started to get more interested in Star Wars, and also thanks to being in Florida and engaging in Star Wars through the parks. For me, I feel that is the way I've connected with Star Wars the most over the years, is through that immersion that naturally came with whatever Disney World was doing. So I was always a huge Star Tours fan. Captain Rex remains one of my favorite droids ever created. And Star Wars weekends, those years where that happened, was insanely fun. I missed that as well. It wasn't though until Starcruiser that I feel I really found my area, my space, that I'm all right, this is the thing that I'm actually 100% obsessed with. So yeah.
What's that like?
It's delightful. Love it.
It is delightful.
Annika, how about you?
I share a birthday with Diego Luna, so I'm probably older than all of you. I saw Return of the Jedi when I was a very young child. And I have introduced myself not only at science fiction conventions, but at academic conferences, as I fell in love with Darth Vader when I was 7 years old. And it's just true. The relationship between Luke and Vader in Return of the Jedi changed my life. And I never got over it. And so I have loved Star Wars forever. It's my main fandom. That's the one I would never give up. Sorry, Star Trek. But Anakin Skywalker is my favorite fictional character of all fictional characters. The prequels are my favorites. I know that makes me a unicorn, but it's true. there's not a part of my life that isn't minutely related to Star Wars in some way. It's really everything. And I've shared it with my kids. And I have a reputation of I never stop talking about Anakin Skywalker and how it relates to literally everything.
Well, something about that is that it shows the power of long-form storytelling. That when the prequels came out, I mean, I'm an original 1977 Star Wars kid. When the prequels came out, they didn't hit me right in the heart the way that they did for some folks. And then Clone Wars came around. And Clone Wars just expanded on that whole section so beautifully that I can't imagine the prequels not existing now. Is that because they had the space and the time to tell all of these seasons of stories with Anakin. Oh my God, I can't even imagine the relationship that he has with Ahsoka and Obi-Wan. I mean, it's some of the best Star Wars out there is that to me. I couldn't agree more that Anakin's a fantastic character.
Rena, how about you?
I think my journey with Star Wars is maybe a little bit similar to Kim's. It's definitely something that was always around. You know, my family is very big into Star Wars, and it's very much a generational thing where they're all sort of waiting for like the kids in the family to get into it. I know that I definitely grew up with both my mom and my dad, you know, just occasionally just testing me with New Hope and being like, hey, you interested yet? And I'm just like, no, I'm good. And I kind of just like, I kind of wasn't really responsive to it for a long time until maybe when I was about 11, you know, doing the normal thing that 11-year-old kids do and obsessively looking at Disney World videos on YouTube, because they all do that. And I found videos of the Hyperspace Hoopla show that they did at Star Wars Weekends. And that sold me, believe it or not.
That
was literally the thing where I was like, oh wait, maybe I am interested in Star Wars now, which is like it's so silly when you think about it. But first off, I think I just really like watching the Star Wars characters dance and like on a funny level, it's like, ooh, Darth Vader is dancing to a Michael Jackson song. That's funny. But then like on like a deeper level, I think it was probably more like it made it a little bit more approachable to me, I guess. I don't know.
Sure.
The other aspect of it that really I think I was reflecting on the other day is the fact that I was a really big stan of Snig and Oopla, and just as original characters, I just really loved them so much and I latched onto them. So yeah, so they're a big reason why I am as obsessed with Star Wars as I am right now.
I guarantee you, no one else has told us that. So you are definitely the first. You're a pioneer with Hyperspace Hoopla. That is super cool. I'm not familiar with this. What was this? Because I'm not familiar with what it was.
Dance party.
Yeah, it was like it was a show at Star Wars Weekends where they just had all the characters from basically. I think it was just the movies. I think they added in Ahsoka later, okay. But it was just like characters like Darth Vader, Boba Fett, like the Stormtroopers, just pretty much anybody, and they would just have them dance to pop songs.
Oh, that's great.
Whatever was popular that year, they would just dance to it.
So did they ever do Call Me Maybe? Because that would be just the best thing ever.
I'm sure they did at one point. I have to go back and check, but I'm fairly certain it happened.
Oh, we'll check.
Oh, we will check. I'm going to be watching all of this now. So
follow me later.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. That's so cool. So, Coward, what is your Star Wars backstory?
My family did not like Star Wars. So whenever I went to my aunt and cousin's house who did like Star Wars, they were all over the place crazy trying to get me into it. Like my aunt would take me to Star Wars weekends whenever she could. And I did get into the Clone Wars show, the 2008 one, the 3D one.
Oh, yeah.
But looking back, I don't really know if I liked it because it was Star Wars or because it was cool animated show where they fight each other with the sticks.
Sure. Nothing wrong with either one, by the way.
Because I was a dumb little silly kid. You go to Star Wars weekends and they took me into a room with Dee Bradley Baker in it. And I remember thinking, well, when's he going to do the platypus noise? Not really much else. So it wasn't until I was a lot older and could actually go into more fandom spaces that I realized that there was like a fandom surrounding the Clone Wars. And that's when I got more into Star Wars in general. It's when I got into like the actual plot and like the characters, the story, what happened. And then I was like, oh, this is really good. I want more of this, please. it's just been slowly escalating up to here. I've gone in and out and in and out again, always going to a different part of it, since there are just so many parts of Star Wars to explore. Yeah. I know someone on Tumblr described it like Star Wars is a university and you can major in certain parts of what it's produced. And it was like every time I'm going out and going back in again, looking for the next degree, and a side character is only seen in this one scene.
I love the idea of a university, though. That's fantastic.
I'm enrolling like now.
Well, that's where you could be Dr. Smith. That works perfectly, actually. There we go. Sarah, how about you?
I don't know. I think I was probably like, I don't know, 7 or something. And my dad, not even a huge Star Wars fan, just decided to try showing them to us on Laserdisc.
Ooh, that's pretty cool.
And I don't know, like it's weird. It didn't really hit me too hard then. I know I remember enjoying it, I guess, but so long ago. But it wasn't something that stuck with me until the prequels came out. Like it just, I was the right age for that.
Yeah.
Like episode 1 was the world building and that lightsaber fight. Like, whoa! And I was just, my mind was blown, and I was like, okay, now I need to know more. And I was kind of hooked from there. And then, and like you said, the Clone Wars was a real good like eye opener into, again, the world building. Right? It let you just see so much more. I was learning more about different Jedi than the main ones. That I really loved that, and the different like other species Jedi was really cool. That's where I kind of latched onto some of those other characters. And then finally, by the time the sequels came out, I was like, I'm all in. Let's do this,
Let's do this.
ready to go. Yeah. And then it's just been, like hardcore the last few years, pandemic. We just bury ourselves in all these new shows and things to get us through, right? So.
Yeah, the Clone Wars was really an eye-opener for me personally, because I hadn't watched them until the pandemic. And then we went back and actually watched them from the first one in the order that they say you're supposed to watch them in, and watched every single episode. By the time you get to you know what happens when Clone Wars is done. You know what happens next. And yet throughout the whole entire process, it opened your eyes to the things that you don't know. Like, you don't know. Like, when you're watching Star Wars, you're like, oh, stormtroopers, clone troopers, they all suck and they're bad guys and whatever. And then you watch 8 seasons of Clone Wars and you're like, but no, they're not. They're wonderful people. And how do we hug them and tell them we're sorry? It's like, it's just, and that's kind of the like, wow, you really don't know what you don't know. Dig deeper. Go out and read a book, read a comic, something else to, that other side of the fandom that you may not be familiar with, and you'd be amazed at what you can find.
Yeah.
So is anybody else writing any other Star Wars fan fiction other than Galactic Starcruiser? Kim?
Nope, not me.
Oh, so yours just sticking straight with Galactic Starcruiser?
I am.
Hey, you know what? People said it was ridiculous to make a podcast that was exclusively about Galactic Starcruiser. And we're like, hold our beer.
That's true.
Coward, how about you?
No.
That's
That
cool.
sounded like
Leave it
no.
at that.
It sounded like there was going to be a but at the end of that. No, but maybe.
Maybe. That's a good answer.
Okay,
There we
I
go.
like it. I'll take maybe. Annika, how about you?
Yes, I've written quite a lot and continue to write quite a lot of Star Wars fan fiction in general. It's such a rich universe, and I love all of the characters. So I can't focus on just one. I used to say that I was more of a prequel era person, but then I looked at my stats and that wasn't true. I write everything.
Sarah, how about you?
No, nothing besides, I'm still living firmly in this Starcruiser world. My brain is stuck in right now. So.
You are on the Halcyon, the end.
Yep.
And Rena?
Yeah, nope. Starcruiser is the first time that I've written anything in the Star Wars universe, honestly.
So that's super interesting. You guys, Annika, I know you've written a lot about other material in other characters and so forth. That's super cool too. Don't get me wrong, but I'm dying to know, for the rest of you who really kind of concentrated on the Starcruiser, what was it that drew you to those characters? What was it about the Halcyon and you went, this is tripping that creative spark I just need to express some way? Why don't we start with you, Kim?
So I think what I love about these characters is that like it's a totally different experience like engaging with them because they're not like stuck behind a movie screen. So they were created with the intention to engage with people. And so when we look at the source material, it's not a movie, it's not a TV show, like where, essentially, it's the same thing, the same material that you're working with. It's different every single time. The interactions with the characters and as we know them, it just happened to be captured by phones or cameras and people happen to share it. And that's our source material. And so it means that there's always like room to learn more about these characters and also for them to like change over time as well. And of course, because of that, we have a multiverse concept going on, which is also another draw, where we have different actors playing the characters and adding their own unique spin. And all of this is like super like addicting in terms of somebody who loves to dig into story and it's all character based really, and how we're connecting with them as well. So it's just really exciting to, I guess, connect with these characters in a completely different way than you would with any other piece of like Star Wars fandom. So,
Rena, I saw you nodding a couple times there. Was it similar for you?
Definitely with these characters, I think it's so interesting because I think I said this before, that these characters are somehow more than three-dimensional and that they react in way to things that maybe you don't expect them to react in that way. And it just makes them all very intriguing because you think you know who the characters are, but you really don't. And it's fun to sort of really dive deep and figure out exactly who they are. And I think that is definitely something that I really connected with in terms of wanting to write these characters in my free time, because it meant that I really got to study them and figure out what their backstories were from whatever information that we have. It's just interesting, like what you find out when you really start, like both from a research perspective, but also in terms of just playing around with them on your own, because then you start, that's why they do that, or that's why they think like that. So so I think that's definitely what drew me to Starcruiser, was the characters and just how fleshed out they are.
How about you, Sarah? What was it that made you go, these, I got to write about these folks?
Well, we joke about the Starcruiser multiverse kind of concept, where it's really interesting because, I guess you can be really out of character, but there's almost no interpretation that's completely wrong because there's so many, the improv aspect of it, first of all, and the different actors bringing their own spins. You can kind of boil it down almost to, when you've watched enough of it, kind of picking and choosing your own little versions of the characters and kind of making it. I know we've talked about a lot of times, Wraith is a good example of one that I've pulled certain things from different actors when I'm writing him. He's not necessarily based on a specific one. He's definitely influenced by a lot. And it's really interesting because you kind of make your own spin-off multiverse to go alongside, because there's so many, it's infinite combinations of the way that these characters work with each other, right? So It's really interesting that way. It's a lot of lends itself to creativity.
Are you taking? Do you have your own like fantasy football league of your crew where you're like, I like that Gaia and that Wraith and that, or like Sarah said, are you kind of taking an amalgam of several of the Wraiths or several of the Sammys and kind of making your own version of them? A little bit.
Yeah.
But
a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B for me. I don't know how everybody else does it. But definitely certain characters, I have specific versions that I have just grained in my head, whether it's because there's more vlogs of them, so you just have a better grasp of that specific actor, or you just kind of have your favorite bits of different ones, or certain ones bring different storylines to light versus others too. So
that's cool. Coward, how about you? How did the Starcruiser trip your fancy?
Well, I feel like everyone else has given the answers I was going to give. It's like I'm back in high school and I'm like the Socratic seminar. But it is really just, they're dynamic. You could go on the Starcruiser like 2 trips in a row, and even if you get the exact same people and the exact same roles, you're going to get an entirely different experience.
Yep.
Even when an actor has decided they're going to portray a character one way, then the next time they're on the cruiser, they say, oh, well, I'm not feeling it today. I'm going to do something different. it's just amazing to me that they have the freedom to do that. On a TV show, you have a character who's going to act the same way every single time. You know, they've got their canon personality, they've got their canon backstory, and they can't really drift from that without people complaining about it being out of character.
Sure.
Meanwhile, you could have a Wraith with one backstory, and then the next trip you go a Wraith who has like a slightly adjusted or modified backstory to fit the actor's different age or different experiences, and it's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Who's going to complain about? Who's going to go 2 trips in a row and say, "Oh, that's not right"? Who does that guy think he is? That's the wrong war.
Annika, so you've written about, obviously, a lot of the other characters. What was it about the Starcruiser that made you say, I need to explore this world as well?
Spoiler alert, I went on the Starcruiser and it was the first-person experience that definitely, I didn't know anything about the characters before going, that I purposefully kept myself completely dark. I just fell in love with everything. The ship itself, all of the characters, the way they interact with the passengers, the way they interact with each other, the way they interact with Star Wars as a whole universe. I completely agree with the multiverse concept. I love a multiverse. Loki's right behind me. Describe, you can love the Lord of the Rings books and the Lord of the Rings films and the Lord of the Rings cartoons, and they're all valid and they're all a little bit different. And that's what's interesting to me about fandom and about fan fiction, is teasing out how things are the same and how things are different. And so the Starcruiser, which is literally a new universe every 2 days, that it's the same story told in a new way over and over and over again. That is just catnip. That is everything I love about fan fiction and a multiverse, and engaging in fandom in one little cocktail that you can get in a Star Wars souvenir glass.
Exactly. That's awesome. That's
and
great.
This is the first time Star Wars has ever been like that. Like, I love the malleable. It is going to be different. You're going to have different faces for the same character, and that's a really different concept for Star Wars, and it's perfectly okay. Some people kind of have, there's an adjustment period for, they see, Gaia look this way or Gaia look that, whatever, but it all works out so beautifully, and it's just, the dynamicism is just intoxicating.
That's the one thing that is so, one of 1,000 things that's so amazing about Starcruiser, is that if you are someone who enjoys, several different fandoms and fan fiction, you truly are part of the story. I mean, there's fan fiction that's written as, 2 characters that have some sort of interaction and some sort of story. But there's also the fan fiction that's written with, you or an original character in mind. And to be a part of Starcruiser, I mean, we've said it more than once, you become canon as soon as you walk on board. And so for you to write for yourself, an original character, or for 2 of the characters on the ship, or all of the above, it all works. Yeah. Which is just mind-blowing.
Well, Annika, we just heard that, you were on Starcruiser, and I kind of want to ask the rest of the group the exact same question. So, Sarah, have you been on Galactic Starcruiser yet? And if not, do you plan to go?
I have not. It's not probably feasible for me. I'm up in Canada, and it's out of my price range. So that's why I was less scared about delving deep in with vlogs, because it's probably not going to happen for me. So I'm okay with the spoilers, right? Mm-hmm. So I follow a lot of, same thing goes for Disney World, Disneyland. It's dream vacation might not happen. So I live vicariously through, a lot of the popular vloggers, the ones that do Galaxy's Edge. And so I was interested. I was like, what's this about? Well, following it along. And it kind of became, and this kind of goes with this interesting, the multiverse concept and stuff. It was so fascinating to me to piece together the story via different perspectives.
Oh, that's cool.
Basically, like watching one person's journey and then not necessarily knowing what I was watching until 3 weeks later, somebody else's vlog filled in a blank. And I was like, oh my God, I know what happened there now. Yeah, so a lot of that, I think, it's interesting, because I think that's kind of, I was thinking about this, my theory of why I may have started to decide to write more is, as those vlogs petered out, my brain went, what do you mean there's no more to fill in more blanks? I have to do it. It's going to be me. I'm going to do it. And I think that's what happened. I think, honestly, it just was like, I haven't written in a while, doing it. Yeah.
Love that so much. Kim, have you been on Galactic Starcruiser?
I have not. Sort of like Sarah, like her, but not like her. I watch a lot of Disney vloggers. I do it because, of course, I love Disney, but also like I'm local enough that I go, at least a couple times a month to Disney World. So I like to kind of like see like what's going on, where I should go next, in terms of all the new stuff coming out. And so naturally, when all the vloggers started going and doing the media preview and like the maiden voyage and all that, I was right there watching it. And I didn't expect to get hooked into it like I did, but I was fascinated. I wanted to know more, room tours and everything, very exciting, but I wanted to know more about these characters. And the more that the vloggers were able to capture, here and there, the more interested I was, and just started like watching any vlog, anybody posting anything about it, and then trying to piece that story together. And I wasn't sure if I was ever going to get to go necessarily. Again, like price is always like an issue. However, I did end up, getting the opportunity to go, and I am actually going on the Halcyon tomorrow.
Wow! Oh, that's so. It's funny when you wrote tomorrow in the answer. I was like, does that mean tomorrow? Does that mean tomorrow when she wrote this?
I'm getting the night before Christmas vibes where you just can't sleep in your bed and you're just like anticipating, and you have such wonders in store.
What better way to deal with the inevitable insomnia, right, of being too excited than being here talking about it.
There you go. That's awesome.
Yeah. That's amazing. Coward, have you been on Galactic Starcruiser?
No, and my story is pretty similar to Sarah's about all of that. I was following it since people were posting videos of the maiden voyage. And also like her, I was not really sure how the plot went together. These vloggers, they would put in like jump cuts, they'd put in all sorts of edits to make them trendy or whatever. And, it took like the same weeks, and even now when I found our little group here, I'm still a bit confused about how things have went. I've figured it out now, but even when I look back at my fix, I'm like, oh, I wrote that entire thing wrong. I got that. I got the timing wrong. I got that wrong. I got this wrong. And I guess it is a bit of a discouragement to write fix in that sense, in that you can't really know the timeline well unless you've been on it. But at the same time, who cares?
Yeah,
exactly.
It's more the multiverse. I mean, there's no,
even then you only get your timeline when you go on it, right?
Right.
We're still finding out pieces of this character was where at what time. I mean, because it's not just one. There's 6 or 7 different timelines you have to keep track of. You don't not while you're on the trip, but there are 6 or 7 different timelines to follow if you really want to know the entire story from every character's perspective. And we're still getting a little pieces snapped into place, and I love that slow burn reveal.
I joke that we're going to send Kim to one specific part outside the engineering room so that she can record some of the lesser filmed moments.
That's the dream.
Oh,
perfect.
That's good. Well,
that's gonna be the entire trip. Yeah. It's just standing outside in this one hallway to get this one scene.
Well, Rena, have you been on Galactic Starcruiser?
I have. So I went back in May. But I mean, similar to everybody else, I did end up getting more into the vlogs after my voyage. Well, because I did watch them. I watched them a little bit beforehand, but I didn't want any spoilers. So I kind of what we were just talking about. It was the whole thing of, oh, there's so much story that I didn't see. I was on one path and I have no idea what was going on everywhere else. I mean, my mom went with me, and she was on the First Order path and I was on the Resistance path. So I got like bits from her where she kind of told me what was going on.
Mm-hmm. So what specific characters do you write for? And if there's several of them, please let us know. So let's start with Sarah. Who are you writing for?
So my main focus of the ones I've written so far are Croy and Gaia, the Croya ship. Obviously, like, this goes into, specific actors doing specific things. There's one Croy who really plays the the hopeless crush on Gaia. I mean, like canon wise, it's hopeless. It's there's nothing that's gonna happen for him. It plays on a surface level really comedic, but there was one vlog that just got me, and it might have been my descent into like, oh, I'm in this now. The layers of it were just so juicy, and the vloggers were egging him on, and it was so good. And I just said, you know what, I got to make this happen for this guy. It's just so sad, And originally it was supposed to be a one shot, just a short little interjection, one chapter of something that maybe between the days something happened, and how does it affect him long term? And then my brain just kind of kept going, and I had to add, well, let's do this person's perspective, and then it just I don't even know how many chapters later I'm still going.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing when you watch. Like you said, some of the videos are just very comedic and very like, oh gosh. But then every once you'll see one, you'll be like, oh, that's kind of sad.
There's extra layers to this version of Croy, and we need to explore this. Yeah. It's so complicated and so like problematic in certain ways, and because canon wise, she's just distracting him. He's just not a thing. But it's fun to think, what if?
Yep. Coward, how about you? Who are you writing for?
From like a perspective, I've mostly written for Sammy. Well, I've only written for Sammy and Wraith, respectively, in 2 different fics. And for Sammy, I mostly just wrote him into the story because it was like a fix-it fic. It was like, I'm going to take the ending of the story and I am going to see what happens afterwards, and I am going to make it all work perfectly in the most crazy way possible. And we're going to have some fun with it. It's going to be, what better for a fix-it fic than a mechanic?
Right.
Yeah. Who better to fix Croy than the mechanic guy? But that was why I wrote for that. But I also saw in Sammy just like, he's disgruntled. He wants to just get this guy off the ship and nobody is listening to it. Which I could relate to. If I was in his position, I would be like, yeah, let's just rally. What are they going to do?
Mm-hmm. And what about Wraith? What about your Wraith fic?
That one is a bit more on the romance side. It's like an amicable love triangle.
Okay.
Someone commented on one of Rena's TikToks that like they want to see Wraith, Croy, and Gaia get together after that one scene where they're dancing together in the dining room.
Sure.
And even if they're distracting him, I thought, well, let's just make that part of the plot. Wraith is a schemy character. I bet you would absolutely try to seduce Croy to distract him. And he would say, yeah, I'm better than Gaia at distracting him, thank you.
Well, both of the Wraiths on our voyages, they absolutely would have been doing that. Gaia gave them a run for his money, but yeah, I could see that happening.
Yeah.
No, it was supposed to be 4K words. It turned into 9K words. I have no idea what happened. And now I want to write a sequel to that instead of working on the Sammy.
Annika, how about you?
So I've the ones that I've posted, I wrote Croy and I wrote Wraith, and I guess Talus, if he counts.
He does. Sure.
But I was definitely very drawn to Croy because I like complicated villains, and so he was mine. He was made for me. I love spy stories, and the conceit of a spy story is that you're pretending one thing and then oops, they're real feelings. And so I love a love story of Croy and Gaia where she's pretending, but then she realizes there's something actually there with him, and so I can be all behind that. But I love stories about atonement, and so I don't want Croy or even Wraith, who is a little bit on the not the dark side, but the underbelly of the Star Wars universe. I want to play with them making amends for their dark deeds, particularly Croy. I also want to know why he is on the dark side and what got him there. Again, I love prequels, and so I really like to play with those questions, and so that's why Croy is the one that really jumped out for me.
Kim, how about you? Who are you writing for?
So my favorite character to write is Croy. Absolutely love that he's not like your traditional like mustache twirling villain. I love that, he's ambitious, but he's kind of naive. He can be comedic at times, unintentionally, of course, which is the best. But I also love that aspect that we've seen in a lot of variations of his character where he kind of gives the impression of being like a cog in the corporate wheel, which is personally something that I love in any character in any fandom. Like I have a corporate job myself, and so I find it so like relatable and endearing almost to pick out those little moments that kind of show like the whole data analyst background thing and trying to climb the ladder, not really doing a good job because his coworkers don't like him, all that stuff. Absolutely loved it. So I feel like with him, like the plots kind of find him. So I find it very easy to sort of craft stories around his character. I also write mainly romance. I'm a big shipper. So I started out writing Kroya because there's tons of material on that. Some very excellent blogs, like Sarah had mentioned, that just really pushed it forward. But I'm also like a very big optimist as well. So for me, I'm like, maybe it's problematic, but I really don't care. Like happy endings for everybody in my fics. Not that they don't go through it to get to that point. And then more recently, the fic I'm working on right now is Crayola, which is a little bit more of a newer ship, I guess, within our fandom, which is Croy and Captain Keevan. And that kind of came out of sort of getting feedback from some passengers who said that they saw some sparks between those two. And we hadn't really seen any footage of it. And so I kind of took it as a challenge to see if I could write it. And now I'm kind of like hooked on that ship as well. And I love being able to find those moments in the vlogs and then also continue to figure out how that would happen and what they would do afterwards, like through my fic. It's not finished yet, but it's very long at this point. So it's fine.
Rena, who are you writing for now?
I think I've definitely at this point covered almost every. Yeah, no, I think I've written almost all the characters by this point, but by far, I've written the most for Wraith, which is incredibly hilarious given the fact that when I got off my voyage, I literally did not care about him.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Basically, I wasn't on his storyline, right? I was on the Resistance storyline, and the character that I was playing on Starcruiser, I kind of saw Wraith and I was like, you know what? I don't think I want to align myself with him. I'm not sure this is the dude I want to be hanging out with. And then my datapad missions sort of forced me to be on some of his story beats, and I was like, all right, fine, I guess I'll be here. and I remember like kind of reluctantly being like, all right, cool. I mean, I'll go, but like I'm not invested in this dude, but all right, great. I just didn't know. I didn't know really who he was until after I got off. And I think it was when I was writing my first Renka fic, so Wraith and Lenka. I was on Lenka's storyline mostly for that voyage, and I stuck really close to her. So I kind of felt fairly confident about writing her, but I was kind of sitting there going, ooh, I know nothing about Wraith. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I could do this. So then I started, I went back and I looked at my own footage because, of course, like even though like I was reluctantly at the missions, I still took videos, I still took footage because, of course, like I'm not gonna not do that. So like I don't know when I'm going back on Starcruiser. Right. But I looked back at my own footage, I looked at vlogs. A lot of it was sort of just honestly just free writing and just kind of writing dialogue for him or just writing his movements until something worked. As I wrote that fic, it like things started clicking, and I remember getting to the end of that one and being like, oh, he was way more fun to write than I anticipated. So then I wrote another fic with him and another one and another one. And it kind of just kept going to the point that now I have a Wraith cosplay that's sitting in my closet.
Yes. That's great.
That happened.
I think this is a perfect description of a good scoundrel character, though, honestly. Like at face value, you meet him and you're just like, what is up with this guy? And then you start to see the layers, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The deeper levels of what's going on. And you're like, oh, this guy's got a heart. Oh, a heart of gold. Okay,
Exactly.
It just works. It's perfect.
That's literally it. Because the thing that I think I had to discover about Wraith is that he has reasons for everything that he does. But if you are not somebody who is close to him, or if you are not somebody that he trusts, you're not going to know those reasons.
Right.
It's very interesting to see, like, once you really get down to like who he really is and what his motivations are and who he cares about versus who he doesn't care about, you start to see it. And it's a sort of thing where it's like his motivations are obvious to me now, but I also understand how before I wouldn't have even known.
Yeah.
Well, you're talking to three people. If we stumbled into a Galaxy Quest situation or a Last Starfighter situation, and Wraith said to us, "You're my only hope, guys. You need to come with us," we'd be like, "We're in." So you got us. And it was like that for both actors for us. So when you said you didn't have a connection to Wraith, it's my brain is jarring here. But now it's good to see that you have the cosplay in your closet. So.
Voyage 2.
Yeah. Trust me, Voyage 2 for sure. I am doing that entire storyline because I have, like, obviously I had a great time on Starcruiser, but I have major regrets for not paying attention to Wraith enough.
So we've heard about Wraith, and we've heard about Croy. Are there any other kind of characters that you specifically like to write for, and why?
I mean, I could kind of jump in first because I know we talked a little bit about Gaia. Gaia is incredibly fun to write. She's got that attitude. She can do anything. She has these like very distinct like movements, the way of speaking, like everything that makes her such a fun character to write. But I think, at least personally, what has me like keep coming back to her and keep being intrigued by her is also what we don't know about her still with her backstory and what we're still trying to piece together. I know that everybody here would probably agree with me that part of what we're dying to know is what some of those lyrics mean, from her music.
Uka Shuka, for example.
Yes.
Come on.
Yes.
Where is the album?
Exactly. Where is the album? It's like number one thing we all want, right?
Yeah.
But I know that like for those of us who write like more like romantic or shipper stuff, like we want to know like all the pieces of Poverty of Love. That's the romance song. There is this huge part that we don't know what she's saying. I think there's this one vlog where actually at one point like Croy says a few lines from it, which kind of like seems to like kind of shake her up a little bit, like in the best way. And we're like, what did he say? What did he say? We have no idea. So like that's one of those things where it's like, can we have it written out? Can we have a translation? Like, please, like we need this material because it's fun to come up with it yourself, but then we also know that it's out there. We just don't have access to it yet. And so it's kind of like waiting for that,
I have an answer. So I have found, we got together and talked a little and mentioned that no one really writes Sandro and Owani because their storyline is sort of very contained. And it is a romance, and so we don't need to give them a romance because they already have one. So I started thinking about Sandro because I was on the first order track, so I didn't interact with him very much. But in the finale, I was taking a selfie surreptitiously with him, and he noticed and so smiled and did this whole little thing for me, and I fell in love with him at that moment, and it was like the end, so I couldn't do anything with it. But now I want to tease out that like his storyline separate from what happens on the ship, and he does, he's like a little, he's got that sort of comic book orphan boy, rough childhood, but now is living his dream. And I think that could be a lot of fun to write and play with. And so I have started like writing ideas for where I can go with that. And if I end up putting it into the fic that I'm working on or end up writing something separate for him, I am like excited by the idea of exploring Sandro, who I feel has been sort of neglected a little. It's a very Disney character. Like I can see a Disney fairy tale storyline in him, and so
it's Aladdin. He's the street rat.
Right,
Literally,
exactly.
that's literally what he is. I want to hear Sandro
your
sing.
dreams.
I want to sing Street Rat. Come on, Sandro, sing. I want that song.
And he could sing it probably really well and play it immediately too.
Yep.
Probably.
That'd be amazing.
Who's written? I know some of you mentioned it, but who's written some Lenka? What are you thinking about with Lenka? Rena, you raised your hand.
I have written Lenka. So I know I said earlier that obviously that I had regrets about not following Wraith, but do not get me wrong. I loved every second of being on Lenka's storyline. I love her so much as a character. I just related to her really hard. It's really interesting to write for her because she really is somebody who, she's a fighter. Honestly, she is. She's also somebody who, if something throws her, she's not going to let it throw her for very long. Or rather, if it throws her, she's going to deal with it in private. Like she's not going to air it out for the whole world to see. She's going to keep it to herself until she is with somebody that she trusts. I mean, honestly, that was my core moment that I remember from interacting with her. Is I remember it was like right after muster on day one, and it was like literally right after Croy had stormed the ship, and I was talking to him. I was talking to Lenka. I remember I kind of asked her. I was like, "Hey, like how are you feeling about all this?" And I just because she was very pleasant with me. She was smiling, and as soon as I said that, her face just dropped, and she was just like, "Oh my god, I don't like it. I'm panicking. I'm not going to lie." And she's kind of like starts ranting to me a little bit, and I really key into that a lot with when I'm writing her. I remember that moment a lot.
Oh, that's awesome.
Of just that idea of her just, she knows how to hold it together, but she also knows when she can let her guard down. And it's sort of fun to find those moments of figuring out when is she going to hold it in versus when she's going to let it down, and who is she going to let it down with as well.
I will have to say that one of my favorite Lenka moments is this time around on our second voyage, we spent a lot more time with Lenka and Sammy, all of our time with Wraith, of course. But we were on the bridge when Sammy was in charge, and so awesome. He was, do this, do that, and you could see he was kind of panicked, but he was trying to do the right thing. And at one point, Lenka came in, and her control of the situation to comfort him in some way, to give him strength in another way, was just mind-blowing. It was,
loved that.
Yeah, it was awesome.
So besides you, Kim, has anybody written for Kevin some more?
I've found I've struggled with Kevin chapters, because I've tried to give at least one chapter to everybody, kind of just to get a little perspective, but there's something about her, I can hear her voice, I can write her voice, but writing in her head I struggle with, and I think it's because she keeps her cards so close that it's you're not quite sure in any given moment what she's really thinking, even while you can kind of predict what she's going to say to keep the situation under control, right? And I've struggled with it a lot, and I've tried to be like, okay, I hope I did her justice this time, because it's I don't know.
She is a challenge. I know we've talked about it amongst ourselves as well, that she's the only character that gets a lot of off Starcruiser's screen time, because she was featured in the Princess and the Scoundrel novel. She's definitely shows up a lot in the comics, but we still know nothing about her personally from those two. I remember I was so excited about Princess and the Scoundrel for a lot of reasons, but mainly to know more about Kevin, and it was just so surface level. It really ate at me. I was like, hey, but I still don't know that much about her, Yeah. So I've been trying, through my fic to try to figure her out. And so I'm glad it's coming across, and it also kind of matches with your own experience with her in some ways. So that's great.
Howard, you talked a little bit about Sammy. I got to say, on our first voyage, Wraith was my guy. When Wraith puts a medal on you at the end of your cruise, you're pretty much a Wraith fan forever. Well, what else did you find about Sammy, Howard, or any of the rest of you that you really like about him?
I said before that I relate to him in a sort of, let's just take action, let's solve this. And I think his arc is sort of supposed to be that sometimes the best thing to do is to just go with it and bide your time.
That's cool. That's super cool. Well, Annika, you mentioned your love for the villain and the atonement story. What else is there about Croy that you find fascinating, Annika?
So Kim mentioned that he's an analyst, and that so I love imagining his, working in an office, and this is his big moment to actually get out of the office and get onto the ship and do action, and it's exhilarating for him, but also terrifying. And that's the impression that I got from his storyline. I like finding the humanity in him and how he can be just like us, and hate his job but really want to do well at it anyway, make a name for himself. But then, like you said, that when he realizes what making a name for himself means, it's like, wait, I didn't want that. That's not what I meant. I get the impression that he has analyzed casualty numbers many, many times, knows of the might of the First Order, but the idea of doing it himself, being a party to the violence, is like a bridge that he hasn't ever crossed or even thought about outside of the abstract. That's just that's the complicated villain that I love, and finding how you can get back from that and how you can realize, oh, this is what I've been doing all this time. And these aren't numbers, these are people. And what do I do about that now? Now that I have that knowledge and that I have that emotion in me, what can I do with it? That's such an amazing place to be starting from. And you can go in so many different directions.
Yeah, when he was analyzing those casualty figures from the Hosnian Prime event, that was just numbers. Of course, when you're in the billions and trillions, what's another billion or trillion, right?
Yeah. So, 5 planets, whatever.
Yep, exactly.
With a room full of writers, I'm dying to ask a particular question of, we've got these great, archetype characters throughout the ship, but as a writer, is there any kind of new type of character that you would add to Galactic Starcruiser if you had the Disney Imagineering and casting brush? Is there a different type of character that you'd add to the mix?
I think we're all looking at Sarah right now.
He needs to start.
Well, what I've been having fun doing with mine is writing crew members, like coming up with just mundane little, the side characters that are just filling in the blanks and complementing what's going on. Just why actually I found it funny. You had a previous episode where somebody's telling a story about the crew member. What was it, like Kevin and somebody? I don't remember.
Yes.
Like, you have to find so-and-so. I was just like, this is just exactly, I'm just picturing these things in my head. Oh, it's another character for, that thing. It's just going on. And then they've just kind of snowballed into side plots fully, like into my story. Like,
I've seen Jeremy, and who are the other guys? Jeremy and...
well, we got the chaotic, like, gossip crew members of Becky and Jeremy. And then and Tal is the name for the stormtrooper. And there's a bounty hunter I made also to kind of complement some of the plot stuff, big stuff. Every so often you need to add another character just to whatever the plot things, and then you accidentally get attached to them when they're supposed to be a one-off scene thing.
I know with me, I think just because you just have just Croy, like, as like a regular talkable character, like you can't talk that much to the stormtroopers, I guess, I think it would be cool to maybe have somebody underneath Croy, like also working in the First Order. There could be a lot that could be done with that potentially, like maybe maybe she could have opinions about Croy. Maybe she aligns with him. Maybe like everybody else we've seen in the vlog, she doesn't like a thing he does. Maybe she could secretly be a resistance spy. Like, I don't know. But I think also, like, it would just be nice, I guess, if you're focusing on the First Order track to, I guess, have another character to talk to as well. So I don't know if that would like make it into like any of my fics, but like that would be like my first thought though. So
that would have been my choice as well. We love Croy. Croy's fantastic, but if we could just add another character to just play off of Croy, I think that there's a gold mine there. So Kim, dynamite answer. Well, thank you so much to all of our guests today. What a fun discussion. I want to thank Rena, Annika, Howard, Kim, and Sarah. And boy, safe journeys to you, Kim, on the Starcruiser tomorrow. Let them know that the heroes of Halcyon say hello. And to all of you, bright suns, and thank you for Star Cruising with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Well, that was one of the most fun interviews ever.
It was. And to hear how these authors kind of have explored the characters of these people that we love so much, I can't wait to read all of it.
So it is amazing to hear all the different character connections that they've made, or the ships that they've had, the ships on the ships. Yeah, the ships on the ships. But just so neat to see the nuances that they have found in their research, whether it be stuff that they've read or stuff on YouTube, or it's just fascinating and fantastic.
I was so impressed that a lot of these stories had been written just from what they'd watched on the vlogs that people have posted on YouTube. And they found the little moments between the moments where they were like, I wonder what happens here. Hey, wait, I could make something up and write it. Just such a great way to read and find more about these characters.
It just says how universal this experience, the Galactic Starcruiser experience is to people that, you can, whether you're in it in person or just watching it on a vlog, you can still pick up these moments from these characters that are so special and expand on those. What an incredibly creative, wonderful community Galactic Starcruiser has surrounding it.
Well, and really when you think about it, I mean, as much as we've put into our characters, we've kind of built a little bit of fan fiction around Zoran and Jorg and Mali just in preparation to get on the ship.
Yeah, I think anybody who goes on and writes a backstory, they're engaging, obviously, in writing a little bit of fan fiction.
I've got over 24 pages of backstory for Jorg Sakul for not only this, but I actually expanded it to future adventures that they exist only in my head, but they're so amazingly fun to create.
Yeah, so just seeing these people take these stories to the next level, to really dig into the characters and the relationships we see on the ship, and the ones that we don't see, and to explore what happens, it's really fun.
And to see the different combinations, of character interactions that you do not and likely will not ever see on Galactic Starcruiser. What if this character interacted with that character? What would happen? The results are sensational.
Hijinks and romance ensue.
Well, Christine, if people wanted to reach out to us and find a little bit more about us and the heroes of the Halcyon on the web, how would they do so?
You can always find us on Instagram at Heroes of the Halcyon, on Twitter at Halcyon_heroes, on Hive Social at Halcyon Heroes, and you can always email us at heroesofthehalcyon@gmail.com.
And don't forget, you can also go to our Patreon page now at patreon.com/Heroes of the Halcyon.
Well, it is always fun to shoot the poodoo with all the Starcruiser superfans out there. So until next episode, it's our honor. Now let's raise our glasses for the Halcyon toast.
Tabuite!